Good afternoon. I'm Grady Stevenson, the Executive Director of the Department of Community Relations for the City of Cleveland. On behalf of Mayor Frank G. Jackson, I welcome you to the City of Cleveland's virtual Black History Month program. We have reached halfway mark of our presentations this year. And as we continue to talk about strengthening Black families in their quest for equity and equality, it is important that we look at their spiritual health as well as the physical. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow, our conversation will focus in on how we help our community by inspiring them, offering counseling, and illustrating the importance of having a grounding in faith. It is our pleasure to have our honoree, Dr. Sabrina Ellis, take part in our panel discussion on yesterday. But I'm especially anxious to hear her conversation today. The faith community has been and will always be an integral part of conversations that seek directions in strengthening families and communities. Because without faith, our people perish. At this time, I want to turn over to our Black History co-chair, Shelley Shockley, to lead today's conversation. Shelley?
Thank you, Director, and welcome, Dr. Ellis. Today we have with us, as Director indicated, Dr. Sabrina Ellis, who is the senior pastor of the Pentecostal Church of Christ. Welcome to you once again.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I have put together a few questions, and basically this is just an opportunity for myself and the audience to get a better understanding of Dr. Sabrina Ellis, and also to hear where you think the church is going and how the church will look after we have a new order of life based on what we're going through in the past year. So I will start off with saying that this year, 2020, has been a challenge for everyone. For you particularly, it has been a challenging year, both personally, because of the passing of your husband, which I'm sure just added to the challenges. How have you been able to navigate these challenges, particularly with the shift of how we do church? We've gone in person to hybrid to totally virtual. So can you tell us how you've navigated that this year?
Well, it has been a challenge. Let me start there. And also thank you again for this invitation. I appreciate it. But what I have done to get through it is maybe kind of simple, and then it isn't. I have two young adults, in addition to some other staff members. But I mention young adults because they are in that group who are very tech savvy and understand this whole virtual piece. And I will say at the very beginning, I was in panic mode. I was trying to do live from home, realizing after several major mishaps that I didn't have enough bandwidth in my house. And I'm like, what is that? So even the language is changing through this process. And so my daughter, who is very tech savvy and does not even live in Cleveland, she's actually in the Dallas area, basically talked to me off of a bridge because I was so overwhelmed. But she talked to me about calming down, recording, and then putting it up. And so there I'm being introduced to a whole nother way to get a message out to our congregation. And so we started there. And then right at the top of the pandemic, a young man came over and said he wanted to help. He's actually out of the city of Cleveland. And I'm going to take this opportunity to give a shout out to Reverend Chris Attaway. Young man loves ministry, and he pushes me, he drags me, he helps me. I'm like, Chris, what is this? He said, here, it's right here on your phone. You can do it from your phone. So I'm saying all of that to say that I've been fortunate enough to have young people around me who are helping me. I know everybody is not happy about the virtual. Everybody wants to gather. And so the challenge for me has been making the decision that I felt was the best decision for my congregation. And I feel like that's what all the leaders are doing, whether they never stopped having church, whether they're doing the hybrid, or whether it's all virtual. Everybody had to decide what was best for them and their congregation. And that is a challenge because the people that don't have to make that decision, they all have various opinions about what we should be doing. And it makes it a little awkward at times.
Okay. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about as far as ministry goes, in recent years, my own perception or view is that there are more women who are in positions of authority or prominent roles in the church. Do you see that has increased recently? And what do you think is the reasoning behind that?
Well, I do believe that over the last several years, it has been gradually growing. Women in leadership, actually, not just women in ministry, but women in leadership. And I do believe that we have, it's growing more and more exponentially. And when we look at what's happening in our own government, women that now are in the Senate, congresswomen, all of that, and now a vice president, female vice president. I think that the world needs to recognize that the women are coming and holding these positions. The reason, I think, without trying to sound overly spiritual, it is in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, that I feel like if the women or a woman was blamed for messing things up, if you will, in the very beginning, that it's going to take women to clean it up. So I think that's just one opinion that I have about it. But in addition to that, we're equal, and it's hard for whatever reason for human beings to understand equality. Even in the PBS show that we were talking about earlier, that we watched last night at the beginning, talking about slavery, all humans, but one group of humans not seeing the other group of humans as equal. That is an issue that goes beyond just racism, but it also impacts the gender issue. One group feeling like they're more superior than the other. And I believe at the end of the day, God is trying to get us to understand that when he made man and woman, he did not intend for them to not walk in step together or side by side with somebody leading as if that leadership is greater than or better than the person that's following. Every leader has followers, but we have to recognize that there are some awesome female leaders that have existed always, but are now coming to the forefront and not having to hide behind anything or anybody as it relates to their leadership. So yes, it is very prevalent in the church, but also in corporate, in government. Everywhere we look, women are stepping out front. And I say to our young girls, pay attention so that they can look forward to what their future is going to look like.
So in listening to what you said and piggybacking sort of on that, when you say that the Bible says that God made man, God made woman, and God made man and woman, but he made woman out of the likeness of man, and he did not expect for one to necessarily be um, truly empowered over the other. They need to walk step in step. So would you say, particularly since you have a history with your church, with your husband, of leading a large congregation, would you say that over the years there have been times when, although it may not have seemed like it to us, the public, that you were leading at times and he was leading it, that you had a shared sort of ministry, and that's how you are more adept at doing what it is that you do?
The one word answer would be yes. um, my husband was a great supporter of women in ministry and women in leadership. And it may have had a lot to do with him growing up with a grandmother who was a preacher as he was a child. And then he had a lot of strong women in his life growing up in his teenage years when he was a part of the church and watched that. So it impacted his position and his thinking as it related to women. My husband was my greatest supporter, my greatest fan. He kept his hand in my back, pushing me, telling me, you can do this, you can, go to school, finish. Okay, I finished, I'm done. No, you got to go now to the next step. And I'm thinking I'm done. He said, no, there's one more. You got to keep going, get that doctorate. And I give him a great deal of the credit. He didn't do the work, but it was his voice that continued to encourage and promote and push. And so we did and do have women in ministry in our congregation. And so we didn't feel less than. If he gave us an assignment, that was our assignment. He wasn't looking over our shoulders. He relied on the leadership and the gifts and the contribution of women. So even in one of the organizations that he's one of the founders of, you've heard of, comes to Cleveland annually, the Joint College of Bishops, female bishops being a part. And it's a beautiful thing to see men and women who are in leadership with the same responsibilities coming together, learning together, and worshiping together.
Okay. Now, in reviewing your bio to try and get to know you a little better, and seeing some of the things that you have done throughout your ministry, a lot of that has focused particularly on women. And I guess my question would be, how will you pivot now that you are, not that you have not had involvement in other aspects of the ministry, but a primary focus, but how will your vision, I guess, shift now that you are overseeing the entire flock?
I guess I don't know if it's a shift. I get, maybe it is in some ways. I think I just have to now, I know I have to reprioritize some things because the ministry to women is still very important to me. So when you say shift, I almost see it as like leaving it and going to something else. I may have to ask others to be responsible for carrying out a particular vision, but ministry to women is still critical to me. Yes, at this point now, I am responsible for an entire congregation, which I am in this pandemic season trying to really push and encourage as it relates to ministry outside of the four walls. And so even the vision shifts a little bit. We still do ministry, but now just trying to work through what it looks like and what the priorities are. as we go through this season. And when I say season, transition, meaning my own personal transition, our church's transition, and then what's happening in the community and in our world.
Okay. And that takes me, and you touched on it a bit when you said that your daughter and a young man have been very instrumental in helping you to navigate this new world that we live in with virtual. One area that I consistently hear that the church is losing is our young people. Many have said that millennials and exers, and I don't know all of the titles, but many of those younger folk are not, they've either been involved in the church for most of their lives and then they walk away for varying reasons. But because that we are now in this world of virtual, hybrid, and in person, once we have a look at the world on the other side, do you think that this will be opportunity to engage, or do you see even in this last year that possibly you have engaged more millennials and younger folk because we have taken the church from within those four walls and put it out into cyberspace?
Well, I think I right now I'm frustrated with myself for not actually having memorized what the numbers are that make up millennials, because what I'm finding, both my daughters are millennials. Okay, so Jasmine is 30. They'll kill me for telling their ages. Jessica is like 35. I know that they're millennials, but that is the group right under them that, from what I can see, is the group that we're really losing. I see more millennials that are still connected on some level. They think differently. They don't do what we do or have done. They see church differently. But I feel like sometimes we are lumping all young people into that millennial category. But what I've seen from my experience is it's my daughter's daughter, my granddaughter, and her crew, that's 17, 18, 19. And I will admit, it is very difficult to get them engaged in church. I grew up in church. I've been in church all my life. But when I was that age, church was my life. I loved it. I loved every bit of it. I couldn't imagine being anywhere else. It's not like that today. Our children have a whole lot of other options, and they want to explore those options. And before the pandemic, it was scary. Our church personally struggled with keeping the interest of teenagers. When we first came to Cleveland, we had a rocking, vibrant youth department. And over time, they all got grown, some went away. And so I'm not sure, I'm being transparent, I'm not absolutely certain what the answer is for keeping those young people engaged. I don't think that just because we're virtual, that's going to keep them engaged, because it's still church. I think we have to figure out how to speak their language, still saying what it is we believe and what we believe we're supposed to be doing and what we believe is the best life or lifestyle for them. But I'm not sure that we've understood or learned to speak their language, whether we do it person to person or virtually. And I feel like there's a lot of work that has to be done in that area. Everybody may not be seeing it the same way I do, but from my experience, and like I said, that's my granddaughter's age. So I'm not sure how much of that language I can speak, and that's unfortunate. I'm open to figuring it out and learning it, but I feel like that's where getting with other churches and other pastors and other leaders and doing things together and jointly, and actually speaking to those young people and trying to figure out what it is we need to do to keep them engaged.
Okay. Understood. So we've talked about young people, and I guess with a pandemic, with this virtual environment, with the lack of in person, the other population I think that sometimes gets lost in this conversation would be our elders, those who brought us this far. And many of them, I am going to assume, are feeling left out of this conversation because many, although there are more and more, I'm seeing more and more tech savvy elders than I did a few years ago, but they're being left. So how do we navigate? What does a church look like, and how do we do to ensure that we are trying to touch each of our demographics?
Yes, that is part of this challenge, and it has taken time, and so it's about technology in many ways. The whole challenge has been about keeping the congregation connected, and so we do have the Zoom meetings, but the seniors are not going to do that. They are just not going to do that. And so we've had prayer calls where you just dial a number and there's prayer. I have sent cards, and that was so meaningful. To the entire Mother's Board, I just had cards created and just sat down and sent them out, mailed them. They just want to know that they haven't been forgotten about. Recently, I added the phone tree to all the other things that we're doing virtually and through technology. We have email blasts, we have text blasts. So if I do the phone tree, they actually get to hear my voice, even though it's recorded, it's still my voice. And it's really about being connected. They want to know that they have not been forgotten. The other piece that we had in place before the pandemic, and that is we had elders that were responsible for groups of the church divided by the alphabet. So they are responsible for reaching out on a level that I may not be able to. And so the visiting, and if they can, or finding out what the needs are, if they need water, take it to them. But trying to think of every way possible. And yes, the seniors have been a concern. And if it's a regular phone call, if they can call and listen to a prayer or hear my voice some other way, then they're feeling better. I've sat down to even call them personally, or assign somebody to call them personally. But that's what we have to do where the seniors are concerned, because technology, if they have to rely on all of that, the Zoom and the virtual services, they're going to be left out.
Right. So we've been on Zoom or technology because we're on WebEx right now, but just the same, it's just a screen and we're talking, and that we've learned. And as you and I said prior to coming on live, we can get Zoomed out. We can get WebEx out. We can, all of this virtual stuff without contact can be challenging. So my question to you, because I feel it a little bit in my life, it seems like it appears as though even more, seems as though even more, though we are in the beginning, this time seemed as though it were reflective and we had a little more time to ourselves. But now, after we've been in it for like a year, it seems as though your schedules become very full. So my question is, what does Dr. Sabrina do for self-care? Because self-care is a very important part of all of this, because if you don't care for you, you can't care for that whole congregation or anybody else.
Right. Well, first of all, I'm glad to hear that somebody else feels like this busyness has escalated, even though we're sitting down in front of a computer. It's like I feel like I'm ripping and running, but so it's not just me.
No, not just you.
I have been intentional about self-care. I really intend to even do better about that. But in this season in particularly, I knew I needed to step back from some things because, well, I did some self-care prior to my husband's passing, but dealing with the whole process of, first of all, pastoring a church. From my assignment, we went right into a pandemic. So my whole pastorate has been in a pandemic. I served as the executive pastor prior to taking on this responsibility. So I've been in a role of pastoring on some level, but not where everything stops with me. And so the whole pastorate has been in a pandemic. So I knew I needed to slow down. In the beginning, it was like impossible. I got to get this or I'm going to be left behind. But then I realized, and then being his caretaker, it was a lot. It was a lot. And so I realized, though, I do have to step back. I do have to take care of myself and be intentional about it. So I schedule the massages. I schedule the whatever, the pedicures, the manicures, the whatever, just the time to be by myself, and started reading more. I don't know when I had a chance to read a whole book. You just go through it in spots and say, okay, I got the gist of it. But just trying to take time for myself and trying not to be too hard on myself. I feel like I'm leaving a whole lot of things undone, but it hasn't brought the world to an end. So I guess it's okay. And just accepting that. Just the quiet time and reflection, things of that nature. Can't do a whole lot of going anywhere, although I probably traveled more than many during the pandemic. But just being okay and with where I am right now and taking care of myself. But self-care is critical. It is critical.
So when we talk about strengthening families, and that's good, I'm glad to hear that you're doing that, and we're talking about this self-care, what advice would you have for other women? Because we as women do have a tendency to make sure that we're caring for everybody else, making sure everything runs smoothly. And then we are the afterthought, and unfortunately, sometimes when we get to that afterthought, it's too late. So what advice would you give, particularly during this time, when we are still fighting for equity and equality? How would you suggest that we do our own self-care?
Well, you're right. We can work. And many of us, many women are caretakers on some level. But what we do is we push ourselves. But at the end of the day, there is always something that you can take off of your plate. We run ourselves ragged, and then I know what I have experienced is we do everything for everybody and we're always there. We're at every meeting. We're at every event. We're just there. But you end up not feeling appreciated for always being there. And it's not, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that you're not appreciated, but you do so much that you feel like, or I should say, I have been in the place where I have felt like, well, I don't feel as appreciated about everything that I've done. And at the end of the day, you realize that, well, since you were going to do it, everybody was just going to let you keep doing it. You seem to be happy doing whatever you were doing. So they allow you to continue doing what you do until you decide that you're going to stop and take some things off your plate. And I have said in some women's sessions where I've been teaching, I said, create a list that is a not to do list. We get in the habit of making to do lists, but create something that you're not going to do. At one point, some time ago, made a list of everything that I was doing, everything that I was involved in. And I really did it to show to my husband because I had become overwhelmed with everything. And when he looked at my list, he was like, wow, oh my God. And he started taking things off the list. So that might be a challenge for somebody. Just list what you do, everything you do, everything you're connected to, every organization, every club, every whatever, and then go back and reevaluate that and then slide it right over to the not to do list. That would be the first way to take care of yourself.
All right. So I think that I have asked all of the questions that I had. Director, did you have anything that you wanted to ask Dr. Sabrina?
Well, I don't have any questions, but I would like to make a statement. It's an interesting conversation. I know that I've talked to a lot of pastors, Dr. Sabrina, female as well as male, that are struggling with the same things that you are, as far as our virtual church that we have going on now, whether it be in person or at home or whatever it is. The church world is struggling with that right now. And so I know my services are all virtual. I don't have anything in person. I try to do the mandate that the governor has put down and what the mayor has asked us to do. And so I try not to gather people together. I would hate to think that, I cause people to come together and then somebody gets sick and somebody died. That's one thing I would not want on my conscience. So I try to keep everything as virtual as I can. But I had a conversation with my granddaughter over the weekend. It's interesting that you brought up your granddaughter. My granddaughter is 14, I hope. I hope I don't blow this. My granddaughter is 14. And I had a conversation with her. I asked her, I said, what do you think the church could do? Because she's born in church, raised in church. I said, what do you think the church could do to get you and your friends interested in this virtual church that we have? And she took a minute and she said, you know what, Papa, I don't know. I don't know if there's anything the church can do to get us interested in it. And I sat there, I said, wow, this comes from a young lady who was born and raised in church, but now feels like she has no part in church. And I, like you, I'm a church baby. I was born in church. My grandfather, my uncle is a bishop. My mama had me in church all my life. I never thought of life without church. And so when I hear my granddaughter saying she doesn't know, it really took me back. And I said, wow, where are we now as a spiritual community? How do we adjust? How do we shift gears? And how do we make sure that we don't lose this generation because of a pandemic? Because I believe that there's a purpose for it. I think we just have to find out how we rework some of the things that we were doing, because they do have a place. There is a space for them in that virtual world. And I think just one thought that I had, maybe giving them an opportunity to have their own virtual service, because they're constantly on their phone. They're constantly doing things in that world. I'm trying to think of a way that I can get her to say, you know what, maybe I'll do this, and get her to bring her friends and the young people back to that spiritual world. So I just wanted to say, I feel your pain. I know where you're going with that. And I think the church community needs to have I hate to say it, a Zoom session, and we talk about and we talk about how we get our young people engaged in this virtual world that we now live in and that we call church. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you for sharing that. That's an excellent idea. Because I did spend some time, Reverend Attaway and I spent some time talking to my granddaughter, and she was blowing us away with the things that she was saying about church. And it's not that she doesn't like church. She's very selective about the preacher. They don't want to be preached at.
Yeah, right.
That's one of the things they say. They don't want to feel like everything they do is being condemned or judged. So, I basically asked the question, so how do we maintain the foundation and hold on to our belief system if everything that you do is okay, anything goes? And her thing was, it's not that we want anything to go. We want to know what the difference between right and wrong. We want that, but it's how you tell us that. Mm-hmm. It's how you express that to us, and then break. If we're going to talk about what's in the Bible, let it make sense. Don't just throw it out there. Just how does it connect to who we are? How do we get? And so it's going to take some real work. You're right. I believe the pandemic has a purpose. I believe this whole season of stepping back is an opportunity to reset. And I believe that somewhere back, maybe our grandparents, maybe our great grandparents, somewhere in our past, this kind of thing was an issue. This isn't the first time, if that makes sense. Right. Yes. We're seeing it in our time, and it's frightening. It's disheartening. It'll take some folks to the point of thinking that the church is done. He's always had a church. Mm-hmm. It's just now we are a part of this. Talking about shift, this is a major, major shift in the church. And it's scary. If we're honest, it is scary. So, and it does feel like we're about to lose an entire generation. We just haven't figured out how we stay connected to that generation. Because right now it is scary, but having Zooms, letting them have their own Zooms, and having the real conversation, because we're stuck on millennials, and we got a whole group of people under the millennials that don't care if they ever go to church.
Right.
Yeah. And we have a whole generation under millennials who are actually experiencing school.
Yes.
For this something. And once it becomes time for them to go back into the classroom, what's going to be that shift for them, because they don't know anything other than this. When we think about the children who went to kindergarten in 2020, who went to first grade, the young people, something that you guys were talking about that might be of help. I'm not a leader in the ministry, but I will suggest, I noticed that Pastor Tamika, who was on with us yesterday, I know that they have a youth or young adult service on Sundays. It's done via Zoom. I don't know the age range. I just have seen that, but listening to you guys talk and saying that it's not that they don't believe the Bible or want to learn more, but they want to do it a different way. Maybe, someone is always writing their own version of the Bible. So maybe it is an opportunity to get them involved in taking the word and putting it into a format that they all can understand and relate to. So we live in this world of children and people not really wanting to read a book per se. So maybe it's something that they will do multimedia wise to bring the word to life so that it makes sense for them. That's a conversation you all can have with grandchildren to find out if that will help.
No, you're right. We're going to have conversations like this on a more regular basis, and we're going to have to include them, and they're going to be the next leaders, not just in church, but in society,
Right.
in government. And we need grounded people to take the reins from us and to move things forward. Their thought process is totally different. They don't want to go to college. They, and they're at home a lot now. And so they're not together. So you're right. The dynamic of going back to school, possibly with a whole different group of people than you were in school with the last time you went.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to make new relationships, new friendships, all of that. It's a lot to consider. It's really a lot to consider.
Yeah.
Well, I believe that through this whole new dynamic that we find ourselves in, because these young people now, they get instantaneous answers, right? They can pick up their phone, they can find out anything they want to find out right there from their phone.
Yes.
And so that kind of puts us in a quandary, because when I hear you talk, Dr. Sabrina, and I think back on my childhood when I asked questions, because I was that kind of kid, I always asked questions. And I would ask my grandfather, who was a preacher, a pastor, why is it that so-and-so and so-and-so happens? And my grandfather would tell me, give me an answer like, because that's the way God wants it, right? Okay, why does God want it that way? And then he'd say, that's why they have Sunday school for you. You need to go to Sunday school. You need to find out all these things. Well, now, if a young kid asks me a question, and I believe that a lot of times our elders gave us those answers because they didn't have the answers right then and there for us. Now, if a young person asks me that question and I don't have that answer, and they can pick up their phone and they can Google, well, why do I need a pastor? Why do I need to go to church?
Yes.
If I can get this right here on my phone. So us studying is very important. We've got to get in that word, and we've got to research, and we've got to study to show ourselves approved more than ever now. We can't just preach at people. We have to educate them as we preach. We have to make sure that we are strong in the faith, not wavering at times that, things don't quite fit with what we have been taught. We've got to be able to get in and dig out and find out what the root cause is, and then give an answer, right? Have a ready answer for them. And so the word always turns around and it's true, right? There's truth. I don't care how long you bury it, put it away. The truth is going to be the truth every day of the week.
Right.
And so God's word will never fail. Never, never. I don't care what kind of pandemic comes. I don't care what comes out of this. God's word will never fail, and the church will still be standing when all this is done.
Absolutely. I agree. Absolutely. I've heard some people say that people will never gather in church again. I don't believe that. I do believe that it will look differently, and we won't be able to stay there 3 and 4 hours.
Right.
Together. We're going to have to hit it and keep going, because virtual is still going to be there, and people are loving being able to go on to their virtual service and then switch over to their other preacher.
That's right. That's right.
I've seen more church in the last year than I have in my lifetime.
That's right.
I get it. I understand. So we are in different times, and I know we are not to be fearful, but I mean, the reality is this is scary times, and it's because we've never seen so many things happening at the same time. and so many negative things, so many losses. I mean, it's like it goes from one thing to the next. And now we have this winter storm that's going across the country. And it's like, oh my God, what now? You know, you have the COVID vaccines, but now the vaccine is at risk because of the weather. It's like it's never ending. We thought, okay, we got out of 2020. Okay, 2021 is not starting off too strong.
Right.
So
that's why.
Go ahead.
I would just say that's why it's so important that we have faith. You know, God has always told us that He's not going to put any more on us than we can handle. And so we have to keep telling ourselves that. But as leaders in the ministry, you all have, are challenged with how do you do that and how do you do it for everyone. And I will be praying for you all as you get to that point, and try and understand, because it is something even not in the ministry, but I have teenagers that, look at me crazy when I tell them they need to pray about it or get the Bible and read about it. And they don't want to hear it.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
well, I thank you so very much for taking out your time once again to be with us. And I am going to hand it over to Director Stevenson to do our virtual presentation of your plaque.
Thank you. Thank you, Shelley. Thank you so much. Dr. Sabrina, I have enjoyed you these last 2 days. Great conversation, so much information, a wealth of information from your side of the table. I am just blessed to be in your presence. I have had the opportunity to sit under your late husband and his teaching. Blessed to have known him for some time, and now to see you step up and take the reins, and to be with us to share with Cleveland and its residents what the church is all about is a pleasure to be in your company. So, on behalf of the City of Cleveland, Mayor Frank Jackson, 2021 Black History Month Committee, Strengthening Black Families Through the Quest for Equity and Equality, would like to honor Dr. Sabrina Ellis for your contribution and continual leadership and tenacity. February 2020. Thank you so much. We're going to get this to you as soon as we can. I know Shelley and I have a lot of plaques to deliver, but we're going to get out there and we're going to take care of that. And again, I just want to tell you, thank you so much for spending time with us. I know that the residents of the City of Cleveland will get a great deal out of the conversations that we've had with you for the last couple of days. And please come back and join us sometimes.
Let me say thank you. I appreciate receiving such an award from you all. Thank you for thinking of me. And I appreciate what you all are doing in the city, in the community. And if I can ever be of service, just let me know.
But maybe not Zoom, though. Thank you so much, Doc. Thank you, Shelley. Shelley, I turn it back over to you.
All right. Again, I say thank you. I've enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully we will have many more of these in the future.
Thank you.
I want to thank the audience that has gathered or who will watch this later. I hope you enjoy the programming that we have put together for you. And just to give you all a heads up, tomorrow we will have Dr. Yvonne Pointer. We will talk to her about community outreach as it relates to developing and strengthening our families. Then we come into our final week of Black History Month. Praise God and hallelujah. When we will have with us Billy Sharp again, talking about social activism and community outreach. Official lists can be found at www.clevelandohio.gov/Black History Month. Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Sabrina. Thank you, Director. And thank you, Mayor Jackson, for giving us the opportunity to put on programming like this. I wish you all well, stay warm, and we'll see you here tomorrow.